Mr. Mark Joyce. We're very, very grateful. The PNA in Maine and the PAMI Council has been a big part of the PAMI Empowerment Project. We honor, support, and celebrate their work. And at a meeting we said, we really need you to share this on the larger scale. And so, um, with no further ado, I would love to introduce Mr. Mark Joyce. And thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. And I appreciate it, and glad to be new Judy, and glad to be part of Judy's room presentation. So yeah, my name is Mark Joyce. I'm the PAMI Director, Program Director for Disability Rights Maine. I've been an attorney here for 24 years, and I practice exclusively in mental health law. Many cases, some successes, some not so successes, but keeping on fighting. And so I'm glad to do this particular um, presentation about the PAIMI-PAC relationships because it's, it has evolved, like with our PAC, it's evolved over the years. And so I'm just going to go through the way that I've structured it is essentially gone through what the regulations sort of require, but showed like how we meet those requirements in a way that I believe, and I believe the PAC too, makes us like the collaborative sort of way that I interpret the regulations as requiring. And I say this, all the time. I say, even if you got rid of the regulations, it's just a good idea, right? I mean, it's just a really this makes sense to have people with a wide variety of experiences, with the individual's lived experience, to really, you know, figure out how limited resources are going to be used to try and effectuate the what the statute and what the PAMI program is all about. So I'll just start with that, and if people, I can't see the screen for any comments or anything, so what I can do is I can just go through it, and then we can take questions afterwards, or if you want to ask questions in between, I mean, what's easier for you folks? It's not a very long presentation,
I,
so it's not
I,
going to take me that long.
I think that we'll hold them till afterwards because I
Okay,
think there'll be some great dialogue. So
okay,
that sounds like that works.
okay.
Thank you.
So just to get my housekeeping things in order here, it would be that's for educational purposes only. It's not oh, someone, I can hear someone typing. Oh, there we go. It's for educational purposes only. It's not legal advice, nor is it offered as such by me. Material is intended to be timely as the date written and originally presented. Information contained in these materials or presented by the speaker may become outdated. It's the responsibility of any individual using or relying on these materials to confirm their timelines. So this is just sort of a brief history of how the protection advocacy for individuals with mental illness, and that I use that, and I use that phrase because that's within the statute. I don't like using it. I don't like using that term. I like to use this person with a psychiatric label or a psychiatric disability, but it's just I'm using it because that's how it is in the statute and the regulations. And so it's called PAMI for the acronym PAIMI. So it started, so in 1985, Senator Lowell Weicker of Connecticut, um, he had a conversation with an individual from the government, I forget who it was, talking about like if someone needed assistance in like a psychiatric hospital or whatever, if something really bad was happening, how quickly could they respond? And the response he got was there was no sort of quick way. It'd be like, oh, it would take 30 days or 20 days, but you have to go through certain things. So he actually had his staff do an investigation as to the conditions in various psychiatric hospitals over the course of, I don't know how many weeks it was, a couple months. And because of the investigation, because of that sort of report that he got from his staff, they opened up hearings for the kids called the Care of Institutional Mentally Disabled Persons, again, 1985. And so on the screen is an image of the 1985 U.S. Senate hearing titled Care of Institutionalized Mentally Disabled Persons, held to examine issues related to the care and treatment of institutionalized individuals with disabilities. And during that course of that hearing, one of the things that Senator, and I love this is really sort of like encapsulates what he was talking about, was that the 3 days of hearings will focus on those who have been left in the backwaters of our conscience. And so it's like a 900 and some odd page or 1,000 page. It's really, it's both that and the investigation is really like jaw dropping. And and I'll send this out. There's a link to him about a 3-minute interview about how it came about. And so I can send that out when I send the other things that I was going to send out. I talked about earlier with the podcast that I did earlier today. So on May 23rd, 1986, President Reagan signed into law the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness Act, or PAIMI. And at the time, it was limited to just individuals residing in institutions and residential facilities and people who were discharged 90 days after. It was expanded in 2000 to include individuals living in the community. And this image that appears on this slide is President Ronald Reagan is seated at a desk, signing a document with another man standing behind him. The setting appears formal with American flags and curtains framing tall windows in the background. Text on the screen reads, President Reagan's photo opportunities on May 2022 to 2023, 1986. So that's sort of just a real, basic background of how the PAMI Act came to be signed into law. So the purpose of the statute is to ensure that the rights of individuals with mental illness are protected, to protect and advocate the rights of such individuals through activities to ensure the enforcement of the Constitution and federal and state statutes, to investigate incidents of abuse and neglect of individuals with mental illness if the incidents are reported to the system or if there is probable cause to believe that the incidents occurred. That is a lot of, that's a big plate of things and that the statute was passed for. So when it was passed, it required that there be an advisory council that be put in the statute. And the reason, and I know that Jim has done given the whole background of why that was, but just to kind of touch it briefly, there is legitimate real concern that the voices of the people that Senator Weicker had talked about, that the statute was supposed to be benefiting, wouldn't have a voice because there was no voice for people with lived experience, that was in the statute itself. And so they was super concerned that there wasn't anything in the statute that would address that. And so this was put in the advisory council, and it's all through the statute and the regulations, and it is really very important part of the statute and the regulations. And so the regulations required that each P&A establish advisory council to provide independent, and I think this is such a key word here, independent advice and recommendations to the system, work jointly with the governing authority in the development of policies and priorities, and then submit a section of the system's annual report. So there's nothing in the statute that tells the P&As what's required to meet these particular sections, right? And so this presentation I'm doing is just to give like what we do at DRM to meet these requirements, right? So what actions we take to make sure that we're not just meeting the requirements, but also adhering to the spirit, and I think this is important, adhering to the spirit of why this is put into the statute to begin with. Because those are two separate things. But so provide independent advice and recommendation to the system. That's the first thing, A1, that's in there. So how do we, one of the things in the statute says, ensuring the PAC's independent advice, you need to have information. Nobody can, if you don't have information that you can't, there's no way that you can advise on anything unless you're given information about what's going on, what the program is doing, all these sorts of things. And so this is in the regulations that talk about each P&A system shall provide its advisory council with reports, materials, and fiscal data to enable review of existing program policies, priorities, and performance outcomes. And this is super important because, and I'll get into this later in terms of the third part, the PAC at the end of the year gives an assessment of what it thinks how it thinks the P&A is doing, whether it's meeting its requirements, whether the priorities are something that they think are appropriate. I mean, in order to give that report at the end and inform stuff during the year, you've got to have this sort of information. And that's why it's in the regulation. And so what we do, how DRM provides the PAC with this information, and this is just us, this is how we do it, is that so before the PAC meeting, the PAIMI Program Director, me, and the PAC chairs, April Kerr, meet and we draft the agenda. And so we go through this process of identifying any information that needs to be provided to the PAC before the PAC meeting, right? So it's like we're sending information. We're not just handing out stuff at the PAC meeting and then just going through it. It's before so people can take a look at it. We try and do it a week before. Sometimes we meet that, sometimes we don't, but it's always before the meeting. And so an example of some of the, and we have standing items of information that we give. And so these are the standing items. Our PAMI team provides updates and information to the PAC in advance of each meeting. So we always have a written case and systemic report on all our current psychiatric and hospital advocacy. And those are reports like, our reports include, how many calls we took at the psych hospital, how many trainings we did, examples of cases we did, anything that we've talked with the administration of the psychiatric hospitals about, like we think are problems. So all of these things are in our reports, and we send those reports to the PAC ahead of time. And then the same thing with the community, the written cases systemic report on current community advocacy, so that when we have the PAC meeting, the PAC's had a chance to look at what we're doing, like not what we're saying we're doing, or what we're actually doing. And so that we could have that for the meeting when we discuss stuff at the meeting. And then also meetings from the previous PAC meeting. We used to actually, and this is important, someone from the PAC used to take those minutes. And then we determined that wasn't right to do, because taking minutes takes away from your ability to pay attention to what's going on in the moment. And so we shifted that from the PAC person taking it to a DRM staff person taking it, sending it to the PAC before the meeting for any corrections or any sort of comments or whatever before it gets voted on by the PAC to approve the minutes. And then any other relevant information. So I'll give you an example of some relevant information. We were involved in doing comments to they were going to change our rights of recipients, and we were going to do comments about, one of the comments we had was we didn't think that they were going out to the facilities the way they should to get comments from actual people who are at the facilities. So we wrote a letter to the department saying, we have an issue with this. And so and it was a big deal. So we included that letter that we sent to the department to the PAC so we could talk about it before at the PAC meeting. So that's just, when I say other relevant information, it can be a lot of different things. But again, that goes, and I just want to point that out, it goes back to this, right? I mean, this is, we don't send this information because we think it's really important that people have that information because it's not only because it's required, but they really need it. But it is required, just to point that out. And then staff attend the meetings. So at the PAC meetings, the staff, I'm mostly always there. The executive director is there regularly, sometimes depending upon what's going on with our sometimes we have not emergencies, but things, things. I'm always there. And then we have advocates and attorneys. And this is important, even though like if I'm not there or the executive director is not there and someone else is running or not running, but giving the information, or the advocates and attorneys, me and Kim Moody is the executive director. We are always available. Anyone can call us anytime, email us, PAC, and doesn't even whenever. So we're available to answer any questions or talk at any time. So it's not just for at these meetings, because these meetings, and I'll get into when we have them, they're not that long. I mean, they are long, but they only happen every couple of months. So you need to be available to answer if the things come up. So, we have our attorneys and advocates are there to provide updates, share information, answer questions. And that, again, PAC members are encouraged to reach out anytime between meetings. Both PAIMI Program Director, Executive Director are always available to answer questions and provide information, including financial questions about the financial reports. So anything, just ask us, you can ask us anything. And then, then how do we ensure the PAC's independence in this advisory council role? So we have our PAC meetings by Zoom, and that happened because of the pandemic. And to me it's a double-edged sword, because having meetings in person is so good. I love meetings in person, but via Zoom we're able to have people who are further away from our main office be part of the PAC. I mean, not they can't drive, or they don't have a car, or they don't have, so it really does. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword on the Zoom thing. However, we do try. We're gonna have to rescheduling it because of the whole finance thing. A PAC retreat where we're gonna have a whole day where the PAC comes together. And so we're going to have it in Augusta, and for people who are coming from further away, because Maine is such a huge state, we were going to pay their mileage and put them up overnight in a hotel to kind of to make sure that everyone could be there. But that we had a date set for that, but we had to change that for a couple of reasons. And hopefully we'll be able to do that once all the dust settles with this. Are we getting defunded or not defunded? But I mean, with the up in the air with the budget. And so this allows them to discuss issues independently after hearing updates and information from staff. So the way it works is we're there, it happens every other month from 10 to 12 on the third Thursday. So, we do all the stuff ahead of time with the agenda, all the information, I'm there, Kim's there a lot of times, most of the time, and the staff are there. Some if they have meetings and stuff, sometimes they all make a real concerted effort to be there. It's really important. But then at the end, we leave, and then the Zoom. The PAC has the Zoom for as long as they want to meet with themselves without us. We don't. We're gone. And then they also meet separately outside of the formal meetings to strengthen their advisory work. And then, but I want to point out, it's not like this us and them deal. It's like it's independent, because if the advice you give us, if it's not independent, it's just it's not worth anything. Um, but we work collaboratively to make sure that there's a collaborative spirit so that it isn't that us and them thing. It's like, you're separate, but you're together. It's kind of, that's the way kind of look at it. So the PAC's advisory role is strengthened by collaborative efforts with DRM staff, like helping to organize events or providing information that supports the PAC work. We call that our PACtion. Um, and the collaborative approach, this was captured by a PAC member who designed a logo, because the PAC wanted a logo to kind of separate itself from us, but to say, hey, we're the PAC. And so here's the logo, where it's the image description. It's a sign with Disability Rights Maine logo. It reads Disability Rights Maine with rights highlighted, and PAC, PAIMI Advisory Council below, all inside a blue circle. So that was designed by a former PAC member, and she had a few of them, and I think we voted on them, or there was kind of they're all great, but this one came out as the winner. And so we made this, and we made these the big signs you could put up on a table, and here's an example. This is at the above description is a colorful flyer with bold text reading Mental Health Matters, Peer Advocate Legislative Education Day. A megaphone and Take Action sticker appears on the left. Event details on the right say April 24th, 2025, 8 to 4 p.m., Hall of Flags. The bottom reads, "You're invited," in script font. So the right is, this was from, this also happened in 2025, but this is a picture from 2024. We do this event every year, and that's our PAC chair, April. And the image for her is a display table in the Hall of Flags at the Maine State Capitol with large historic paintings on the wall behind it. A woman sits behind the table, which features a large sign for Disability Rights Maine and the PAIMI Advisory Council, PAC. The white tablecloth reads Disability Rights Maine in blue across the front. The table is covered with brochures, colorful keychains, pens, green beaded necklaces, and other informational materials. Large window and metal folding chairs are also shown. So we use that particular PAC logo to identify the PAC, and this is a Peer Advocate Legislative Education Day. And in Maine, there's a Hall of Flags inside the State House where you reserve spaces, so like legislators will walk back and forth. And so like for this one the CCSM, which is our Consumer Council of Maine, they have like coffee and stuff so that people will stop and like look, and so we're able to like inform them what the PAC is, what Disability Rights Maine is, those sorts of things. Also, there's legislation that's happening that affects people with disabilities. We also talk about that. We might have some informational brochures and whatnot. And also we support the PAC members in participation in national conferences. PAC's advisory role is also strengthened by DRM sending PAC members to national conferences like the NARPA conference and the Pre-Conference Institute for PAMI Council members. And these are just some of the places where we've sent folks over the years, and you can see it's all over the country. And so we send both PAMI staff and PAC staff, and it's really great because, the PAMI staff, you're not able to if you have a meeting every other month, you don't really get to know anybody, get to know a person. And so if people are there, it's also helpful for the staff along with the PAC. So we do that. And then can work jointly with the governing authority in development of the policies and priorities. So that's, again, required. And so just kind of some legislative history. So this is super important. So it's to ensure full and active participation of the Advisory Council in discussion and development of the system's annual priorities. So we have priorities that the statute requires us to make these priorities. And so they have to be made with the participation and independent advice of the PAC. And it's not just like a one-shot deal. Things change over the years. So it's got to be a living document. It's got to be a living thing where people can say, well, we should change it here, change it there, or keep it. I mean, and that sort of is really important. And so this is how we create an environment that enables the PAC's full and active participation in advising on policies and priorities. Is that, again, we have the structural processes that support the full and active PAC participation. So these things are in our structure. They aren't, they're not something that I can just decide to do, oh, let's have a meeting now. These are things that we have as standing sort of things. One is that meetings are every other month. So there's 6 times a year, which is double the statutory minimum of 3 annual meetings. DRM staff attend, and the DRM board are invited to attend. So we invite the board to attend. And then the PAC members also meet independently outside of the scheduled meetings. PAC has operating under written operating procedures to guide its work and ensure consistent practices. The agenda setting, as I said earlier, me and April meet ahead of time, develop the agenda, which is then shared with the PAC along with all the relevant information before the meeting. And the PAC members can add any item during the meeting, ensuring they have control over what's discussed. There's no like, well, that's not on the agenda. There's none of that. I mean, if somebody wants to bring something up, they can bring something up. And in fact, there's spaces in the agenda for that. It's like, tell us what, is happening in your community. But it's kind of a, people can discuss, it's a time issue, We always run out of time. I mean, we have 2 hours, but we're always at the end running out of time. And then each meeting includes the dedicated PAC member only time. No staff are present during the period, allowing for independent discussion. Again, like I said before, we're available. Me and Kim are available. Any questions? And this one at the bottom to me, is really important. PAC writes its own annual report assessing DRM's program, which is sent to SAMHSA. The PAIMI Program Director, me, specifically ensures he is excluded from this process to preserve the PAC's independence. I make it very clear that I am not part of this process. I do help with the Scrivener part of it. I help with the fact that it is to like, to put things in the PAC report so that it's, you got to cut and paste and this and that but in terms of the substance of that thing, that is not me. And I make that very clear. And this is another structural process. While the regulations only require the PAC chair to serve on the board, DRM includes both the PAC chair and an additional PAC member on the board of directors. There's 12 members on our board of directors, and 2 of them are PAC members. So, I mean, you're looking at almost 17% of our entire board is PAC members. So it ensures the PAC's voice is directly representative and actively engaged in the discussions and developments of the system's policies and priorities. And then this, this is so helpful to me because this is a very difficult thing because we have priorities, but within those priorities, you can't take every case. I mean, we have limited funding, and it hasn't been increased in years, like 20, very minimal increase in funding. And so the PAC's advisory role is essential in helping DRM considers which priorities to set or change, bringing critical insights and perspectives that inform our decision-making. Even when serious issues exist, we may not have the capacity to take them all on, which makes the PAC's advisory role in development of policies and priorities even more crucial. And we have discussions around that because whenever you take one thing, you might have to decide you're deciding not to take another thing. And those are crucial conversations to be having in terms of those sorts of issues. Now this one, submit a section of the system's annual report, which is 42 CFR 51.2383, the third part. So It's called the ACR. It's a report prepared annually by the PAIMI Advisory Council, provides an independent assessment of how the P&A system is carrying out its work and priorities under the PAIMI program. Report is submitted to SAMHSA, Federal Funding and Oversight Agency, and ensures the PAC's voice is formally included in the reports to SAMHSA. So it's a separate report that's included in, so it's a whole separate, it's their report. And this is a super important part of it. And this image description is a table titled Section G, PAC Assessment of PAMI Program Operations, outlining required elements for the PAC's narrative summary, including priorities, activities, outcomes, case examples, and future recommendations, and other comments concerning PAMI system operations. So this is part of the report. It says the PAC assessment of PAMI program operations. Please provide a narrative summary of the PAC's assessment of the PAMI priority goals and objectives included in the PPR for this fiscal year. So it's the priorities, activities conducted towards achieving the priorities, goals, and objectives, the outcomes, examples of individual or systemic cases, applicable legislative activities, and participation in state mental health planning activities, and any recommendations regarding future priority goals and objectives, and then any other comments concerning the system operation. So it's narrative. So again, this shows why it's so super important over the year, the PAC get information, because there's no way that you could begin to give give an assessment of the P&A system unless you have that information that's available and given to you. And so this is the part I make it very clear I don't have anything to do with. And so the PAMI program director makes it clear to the PAC, both in emails and at PAC meetings, that no input in how the PAC writes the section, does not participate in the drafting or revising the content, even if he sees it before final submission, which I do because I have to submit it. So I see it ahead of time. And I don't edit it prior to submission. So this ensures the PAC section, the ACR, is a fully independent assessment, untouched and unedited by the PAMI director. That being said, if at the end of the year I get this report and it says you guys aren't doing your job, that's on me for not knowing that until the end of the year, right? So that is why, you know, it helps the you know, this is the independent function of the PAC, but they have an opportunity to write this report, and that it's also a valuable opportunity for me to say, okay, what should we be doing? You know, and you know, it's super hard because the PAC's not paid. They're not paid any money. They're all volunteer. There's, you know, people have other obligations, and it's a lot of work. And so, you know, and you're not really given much instruction unless it's through the P&A about what the, you know, what your role is, what your responsibility is, what the PAC is. So, you know, the folks who do this work, it's you know, it's a lot of work, and so I think it's important to make sure you're there through the year to keep that sort of relationship going. And so the conclusion is essentially, you know, building the effective PAIMI-PAC relationship. Independent PAC brings together diverse perspectives, provide advice on the development of policy priorities, working jointly with the board as required by the law. Our role is to support and facilitate the PAC's advisory function, not to direct it. And you know, it's like you need to know during the year what's going on, because if, like I said, at the end, if you get a report that's bad, it's like, that's on me. So and that's the end. So I can stop sharing.
Well, Mark, I just want to thank you so much. I have a question as we lead into, I asked Kelly to share a little bit about from the PAMI perspective, as
Yes.
she's been on the PAMI Council, but I do have one question I'd like to kind of lead into. Kelly, so this might be helpful. So what would you say is the greatest strength between the co-collaboration? Because I really love how you shared, you know, that the actual engagement, I mean, you are really leveraging the strength of lived experience. But what would you say in the work itself? What is the biggest strength? And second question is, what is the spirit of PAMI? How would you describe that?
Do
Are
you
you
want to go,
asking
Kelly?
me or Mark?
Either one, and then you share after, but just
You can
because you
go
guys
first,
have
Kelly.
that spirit collaboratively. It's
All right,
beautiful.
Gil, you choose.
Well, and if you see the winter decorations behind me, obviously I've been too busy to deal with those. I think for the first question, absolutely the openness and the acknowledgement that this is supposed to be consumer directed. And so when we stopped meeting monthly, the PAC was like, okay, well, we have stuff we want to talk about. So we want to take that other month that we're not meeting and meet. So we meet at the same time we would have the month before with the whole PAMI. The next month we meet independently, and nobody's telling us we can't do that. And some really rich discussion has happened there, which has led to, we now have a co-chair, which wasn't something that we had before, which gives us a lead up to when April terms out, we've got somebody else ready to move into that position, and we'll have a new co-chair. So it's really been that openness to, if we have an idea and we say we'd really like to try this thing, they're like, go do it, which has been really well received. I didn't catch your second question.
He had mentioned the spirit of PAMI, and I think that's something that's actually really, and I also want to highlight the dedication of time. Mark, I thank you so much, because being a PAMI council member, I know Kelly can share with you, it is a labor of love, and that we do give a lot of time. And so I'm really grateful that you're saying that. And but what is that spirit? Because both of you guys have it, your hearts are engaged in this work, and so I don't know how you guys describe it.
Do you have a description, Mark?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's so like everything, the legal part of it is so ingrained in the barriers for people to get their needs met. And like I said, that first slide, right? But what you'll find sometimes is people who will like say, well, that's a legal thing or this and that. It's like, who the hell am I? I mean, I've got the experience, I've got the knowledge, the expertise, but I mean, I need to know what people think is important for me to use it on, and in terms of the community. And so we'll talk, I mean, one of the things that, I'll give a perfect example, this emergency room stuff. I mean, that was brought up, and that's one of the cases I took, because that was brought up before about like, man, there's problems in the ED, getting stuck in the ED. This is a problem. So like so it's this thing about you as the PAMI director, I've got to make these hard decisions about which cases to take, because all of our cases, everyone who calls, they have a legitimate beef. I tell you, they've got, I mean, I never talk to anyone, or I hardly get any intakes where, man, there's a wrong happening here. But you have to figure out like, what is the wrong you're going to take? And I remember at an ARPA conference once, and I forget who it was. It wasn't Judy. I forget who it was. It'll come to me. But there was a lawyer talking about how he took this case up to the Second Circuit. And the woman said, who the hell are you to determine that this particular issue, which is not really important to any of us, that should go up there? And she was right. And so, I think that is the collaboration and the spirit of it, is that you need people who have the legal expertise, but if you just have them separate, you just take it over as like you're just not knowing what, it's not right. It's just not fair. It's not right. I guess that's what it is. The spirit is that it's not right to be making these decisions with this money that is allocated to protect these rights on a global scale with a small slice of cash, without having that sort of process with people with lived experience who can say, yeah, I think you should do this or that or the other thing. And you'll find there aren't always agreement within. I mean, there's robust conversations going on all over the place. And so I think that is really the spirit behind it. So the law is safe to do X, Y, and Z, but really the spirit is the best I could say is like, who the hell am I to make those decisions on my own?
And I think, Mark, that y'all as lawyers could be making a hell of a lot of money doing something else. And so, being a part of this is a passion project. We see it in all of the lawyers who work there. And I think it's heartbreaking when we hear from people who are angry because their case wasn't taken. Because as you said, everybody has a case. And so being able to focus on the ones that are going to systemically impact more people makes a lot of sense. And I know you do take individual cases when you can. And there was sometimes, there was that issue with our person in the emergency department who was being ordered to strip and do things that just weren't okay. And because there was a community advocate nearby, because you have community advocates, they were able to go over and help assist, and an attorney was available and went over. That doesn't happen all the time, but when it can, it does happen. And that's, I'm really proud to be a part of that.
That's beautiful. I just want to highlight that you said the passion, and I think that's right, the heart. Nobody has to do this work. So, celebrating a heart behind the work and kind of also celebrating nothing about us without us. It kind of sounds like, you said. So I just want to highlight that. And Kelly, what would you like to share about your experience on, PAMI Council? And then we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, I'll just be brief because I know we don't have a lot of time left and want people to be able to ask questions. I am a person who lives with mental health challenges. I was hired over 18 years ago to work in the Office of Consumer Affairs for the state of Maine. So I have this state of Maine position, but also I'm a person with experience, and I have a child I've been raising since he was 3 who has struggled significantly. And DRM took his case when he was living in a residential program where he was being abused. And they did an amazing job with him. And then I was asked if I would be interested in joining the PAC. And I'm so glad to be able to give back and be a part of that process, knowing how significantly they helped my son. So the other piece, and I put a note, Mark, in the chat that you didn't see, but one of the things that you bring to the agenda as well, and I know you're not doing it with your PAMI time, but that we do get reports about the legislative pieces that DRM is working on and advocating for, which really helps enrich our discussions as well, and looking at our people's needs being met. But also legislation that was brought up because of the hospital, the emergency department case you took. So I'll just end it there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the awesome work you guys do. And this was a great presentation. I really do appreciate it. And I'm hoping that there are some good questions. We're going to open it up for questions. But I think this was really awesome, and I'm really grateful for you sharing today. Questions, raise your hand or unmute, or we can start the dialogue. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. Thanks so much. And Kelly, both of you. I am a P&A person also. I'm New Jersey. And I love what I do. I'm an investigator and an advocate for our state. And, we're all going through a lot right now. We're all pedaling as fast as we can, I think. It feels like that every day. We're pedaling as fast as we can. And we have people from our PAC have been here. We have spoken here about the situations. And I know not everybody across the country works the way you do, the way we do. It's not all that, and which is a shame because the collaborations are phenomenal when they work. There are things about the council. So do you have ad hoc committees come out of your council? Because we have developed that. People bring people that they want to look into, and they have the freedom to do that. So that's a piece of it, is it not?
Oh yeah. We had people who were interested in the emergency room because we were trying to do a brochure.
Mhm.
And so so no brochures that we do are published unless they go through the PAC first
Mhm.
for review and comment.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of the work goes through PAC.
Mhm.
It kind of does. Anything mental
Yeah,
health,
yeah, oh,
we
yeah,
we don't touch a lot of stuff unless it goes through PAC. And PAC brings a lot of stuff to the table and says, "Why aren't you doing this?" So we've got this criminal justice involvement now within our organization because PAC brought that to the table. They said, "We see this as a huge problem, which is feeding the mental health problem, which is feeding the other crises in the state." So I think that that's pretty wonderful. I want to ask you this question now. The way the landscape is right now, what does it look like without the P&A? So I'm going to
Oh,
put that out there.
I had that question given. I did a podcast this morning on committable with Jesse. I don't know his last name on the top of my head, but he does this podcast, and I did it for like an hour. And he wanted to know about what the P&A was. So the whole thing was about what the P&A was and what we do.
Yeah.
And he asked me that same question. And what I told him was that what would happen is that we would go back to the same thing that Senator Weicker saw in 1985. So go and read the 3-day hearing about people's experiences in the hospitals and in these places. That's where we go back to. And I can, because when I first came here 20 some odd years ago, I used to go to the psychiatric hospitals and I'd find people there for 25, 14, 15. I mean, all through the, and so that was what I would say. Without that, go read that report because we're going back.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing that. And I think that people need to hear that we're the gatekeepers. We are truly the gatekeepers. I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah.
I had interns with me yesterday and went on one of the campuses, psychiatric campuses. And we have 4 of them in the state of New Jersey. And there's approximately 14 to 1,500. And that's just the state psychiatric hospitals. I'm not talking about all the other beds in the whole state of New Jersey that we do monitor. But the bottom line is these folks that came in that are the next wave coming into the system saw what they saw and were flabbergasted because people aren't knowing. And our presence, the ability to walk in at any given time, you say within a certain structure, according to our statutes, nobody has that. We have that. That access authority is supreme. Without
Please
that,
share a little bit about that because you're so correct. Could you
I'm going to
share
let
a little
Mark do that because he is the legal person there and he knows that I know it inside out because I bring that with me everywhere I go. But the bottom line is this
because
is
it
his
is
and
so valuable. You're
nobody
absolutely
has
correct.
that. We are the only people that have it.
Right.
Mark, please
So
go
yeah.
ahead.
So that was part of the this is the so part of the statute allows us to have access to any facility that, provides overnight care, which is almost every single facility, and that we have the access to see our clients, provide information referral and monitoring. And so the monitoring is huge because they can't refuse us to go into these places and see what happens and to do the monitoring. And so the access, there's been so much litigation around this area of law, but it's because, and this I just want to read this thing from Senator Weicker's floor speech, which really I think highlights why the access came about, right? Because he says, as we've seen, the interests of tranquility and secrecy require that the voices within these walls be muffled and the truth, where it is told, be related in whispers between agonized family members and isolated advocates. In this climate, the clear and insistent demands of the Constitution and federal statutes exist as little more than rumors of hope. So if you don't have people going in to see these things, you will continue to have that sort of situation. And he continued in his speech on the Senate floor when this thing was getting passed. And he used this particular word, which I think is so important. He said, without protection and aggressive advocacy. He didn't just say advocacy. He said, without protection and aggressive advocacy, these rights guaranteed under the Constitution and federal statutes are meaningless. And so you need this access to go in and see what's going on, and we're the only organization that has it.
Yeah,
Period.
the only ones in the
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
I'm very proud of
Like I
that.
said, you'd go back without the P&A, you'd go back to what it was when Senator Weicker was making these these statements, because
Mhm.
it's shocking, not shocking. No, it's not really shocking, but it shows why they passed this
It's
law.
shocking when people don't know what's
Right,
there,
right,
really, and when people didn't know what was there.
right.
You know, people have heard about the developmental disabilities, and they saw what Willowbrook was.
Yep,
It
yep,
brought light to everything,
yep.
but they did not see what was happening in these facilities where they were holding people with any sort of mental health challenges. And it's abominable, truly abominable, and still is. So we
Yeah.
think we've come so far, but
Oh,
we have not. But we
Well,
are
yeah.
here, and our access changes. Our access goes, we have monitoring access, we have investigation access.
Yep.
So it kind of steps up a notch. You know, when we're in investigation mode, we can pull records, we can take photos, we can do a lot of that in monitoring, but we don't have to ask for permission. We don't have to say, we don't even need a release of information
Nope.
from a person we believe is in imminent danger. We're just like, we're here and we're looking into this, and we need these things, and this is how it's going to go, and you're going to give it to us, because we can take that into a court of law. They can push back all they want, but we will eventually get what we're supposed to get. So we are that. And it's been said in these rooms that we have an army of attorneys. The army is small,
Yes.
but we are mighty. That's the deal. And we all, as Mark said, there's resources that have to be put into certain direction, because there's a lot happening in every single state, not just in mental health.
Right.
You name an issue, we're all over it in so many different things. So I'm sorry, I'm always to feel like I'm
No,
defending us, and I'm
no,
not. I'm
it's
proud of us, and
wonderful.
I support us. And the bottom line is we fear right now. We are worried, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm not worried about losing my job. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried about what will happen if we're not here. Every day I worry about
Yep.
that. So
Well, and
sorry.
it's so there are so many people who don't know about their rights and don't know that this is
Exactly.
even a thing. Like the woman that Mark
Amen.
represented in the emergency department,
Mhm.
it was a nurse that made the call, right? Or told her to
Yes,
make the call.
yes, the
Goodness.
nurse
She
called,
didn't know
told
she
them to
had
call
that right.
DRM, yeah.
People
Yeah.
aren't
The
taught
lack
their
Yeah.
of
rights.
knowledge. That is so, that's
And
why,
also
again,
because, yeah, and also because
go ahead.
rights are fictions unless they're enforced, right? Like
Exactly.
there's not like a thing that exists as a platonic ideal of a right in the ether. There's only like what you have the power, what you are organized to take.
Well, that's one of the things that in the report, in Senator Weiker's report from his staff, they reported there were things on paper that
Right.
had to be followed. Everything on paper looked great, and it wasn't even close to being what was actually happening.
Just
So
want to
education.
highlight in the chat education is number one. I would agree, because I do believe, I think the lack of knowledge of rights and of the P&A system as a whole. That's something Mark and I were talking about. He's going to share the podcast. We'll send it out widespread when he kind of explains what it is, because I think that's important so everybody knows the value of it, right? But Myra had a question in the chat. Myra, would you like to inquire a little bit? I know she was inquiring about the emergency room, and I think this is a wonderful that you guys were working with this. Myra, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was involuntarily incarcerated in a private not-for-profit hospital in New York State for 25 days last summer, and I complained to PAMI, and I was told that they don't have the resources to follow up. So I did file a complaint with the Justice Center, which I think only exists in New York State, but and I'm not sure about this, but I think it's the name of the organization that was founded in the wake of Willowbrook. So I did file a complaint there, and what's going to come of it, I'm not holding my breath, but at least they accepted my complaint. But the real problem, the way I see it, for myself, I was forcibly drugged in the emergency room. So by the time I get into the psych unit, I'm already psychotic from the drugs because I have a bonkers reaction to the drugs. And they all know that. It's all over my records. But, they don't care. And this is like, they almost killed me. My blood pressure was 219 in the emergency room, and they didn't do anything about it. Next time, I'm gonna die. It's been going. I've been locked up against my will about 8 times in my adult life. The last time was 10 years ago, but this was like my blood pressure keeps going up and up and up each time. It's post-traumatic stress stuff, and I'm gonna have a stroke next time. But I don't know how to stop this. I mean, I'm a lifetime activist against forced psychiatry, a very effective one, I think, as far as organizing and what I do. But to make a difference out there in the world, zero. And I can't even keep myself out of the loony bin, let alone keep anyone else out. So I don't I'd like to know what anybody else has to say about what can I do? Because this is very
Miriam,
fresh. This is not ancient history. Some cases, are so old that they can't follow up. I'm still within the statute of limitations of a malpractice suit, but I cannot find an attorney to represent me. There's no mental health attorneys in New York State. Mental hygiene legal services won't help because I got myself out because I sweet talked my way out of there and lied to them and told them I would take an injection as soon as I got out, which I of course refused. But it's like I'm completely at wit's end.
It's a rough
Miriam,
system.
I'm so sorry that happened. I am also in New York State, Hudson Valley area if you want to swap details. I've mostly lately been focusing on responding to the emergency of people not having uh, people suddenly having their home care hours cut back and taken away that they need to live outside of nursing homes and institutions. But yeah, I dropped my email in the chat before, but if you want to drop yours also, I'm Hudson Valley. I'm sorry that happened. Fuck.
So Miriam, can I just ask you a question? And I know a lot of people don't believe that this has any strength and any it doesn't hold up anywhere, but it does because we've made it hold up. Is a psychiatric advance directive. Do you have one?
No, I don't have one
You
because
need to
I
make
had a
one.
healthcare proxy agent who I thought was going to help me. And she did help me 10 years ago when
Okay.
I got locked up. She was very good.
This is very specific though. Very
She was the problem. She was the problem.
okay. Well, I think that a psychiatric advance directive is very specific to a psychiatric hold that when you go in, first of all, in most places, they're supposed to see if you have one. Not everybody wants to register one in the state they're in. You don't have to. But if it is and they do not check the registry, then they're at fault immediately. Okay. So
Well,
we have fought for
I'm
people with
sorry.
that.
I honestly think that the only way I got out of there is because I
Mm.
agreed to take these toxic
It's
drugs.
Right,
and it's very
So if
possible
I
that
had
right.
that
a
is so.
psychiatric advance directive that said, do not give me neuroleptics, I would have never gotten out of there. I would have ended up in a state hospital getting electroshocked. I can promise you.
Okay. Well, I
I
try
do
to
I
speak to
believe
agree.
people
you.
about that. Yeah,
I
it's very
believe her.
possible.
I believe you, Miriam.
Adv Advanced directives, though, I say see them as a part of a preventative. Okay, I'm a huge supporter. That's actually something our PAMI Council did for, community
Uh-oh.
education. And I'm a huge supporter of those. They're not going to work in every case. I'm
No,
not going to disagree at all. But I can tell you, I have a QR code in my pocket that my advanced directive is stored at the base, and that's what we did trainings on and education for the
Whoa, we're
community, and it
really
uploads, and they
skipping
have
past
to.
what she just said.
hmm?
And it's really, really important that you're able to do that. But Miriam, Myra, you do know that there is different navigation. I think maybe sharing a little bit about what other people have experienced in the emergency room. I feel like you having advocates, I mean, that might bring a little solace, but if anybody has any referrals of attorneys too, please put them in the chat because I do know she's been looking for a while and it is, people don't want to take these cases.
Yeah, I also talked to Peter Bregan and asked him if he would be an expert witness, and he said no. He lives in my town, and he said it was too dangerous to his clientele for him to take on a case like mine. And
Whoa.
and he told me not to do it because it would be too dangerous for me. They're too powerful.
Damn, Miriam, I'm so sorry. And yeah, I hope that people don't, yeah, I believe you. And I don't want to
Mhm.
skip past or brush over like what you're sharing because I believe you and it's awful.
I
And
think
you know
we all
something,
believe
I don't
you
think
on
that, I
that.
think we all believe that, you
Yeah,
know, we
we've
tell
seen
some
that
of our
too.
clients the same thing, that maybe it's best to not push back because this is a system that is powerful. You know, we're not talking to just like in our town, it's in our state, it's Department of Health has all the psychiatric hospitals, but Department of Health also has all the hospitals. So there's a power struggle there when we're talking about legislation, which we are just fighting involuntary commitments in emergency rooms where people are being held. So you know there's a hold. Every state has a different number of hours hold. Our state has a 72-hour hold. Not any longer. We have a 144-hour hold now. It went from 3 days to 6 days. Imagine a person going in, as Miriam did, going into a hospital. You need some assistance. Maybe you just need a medication change. Maybe you need something, and you go in, and the next thing you know, you're kind of caught on this treadmill. And that's what has happened. So people got stuck on this treadmill. They couldn't get placement. And then they were held and they were held. And then the hospital, one of the hospital systems legitimately pursued this with the legislators, and it went through in 2 weeks. 2 weeks we had to scramble and push back against it, and it became law. And the law is supposed to sunset in August, but now they've gotten an extension for another year. So, you know, it's like things that, and the PAMI Council is involved with us, of course. You know, we are following their lead. A lot of stakeholders in the state are pushing back against this. We've got the whole community of peers pushing back against this, but there are powerful, powerful people in play. And, you know, even with the agency as it is, we put you know, we've been to the hearings, we do some of that. We're not supposed to lobby per se, but there is some lobbying involved there at another level. But it's difficult. It's very, very difficult because we're smaller in number. We have less money in those numbers, but we're fighting this very, very big fight and really pushing forward to protect people and make sure they're getting what they need and not more of what is being just prescribed as
So you bring
necessary.
up a huge topic, though. That is something, there's laws sweeping across the country where
Yep.
there is
Yep.
expansion just like
Yep.
that. And just like
Of
you
all
said,
this. Yep.
PAMI count.
Yep.
Yep. And it's really important. But I just want to circle back around. And that's really important to be on top of, what the policies that are being in play and all of the above. But I would, if everybody is okay, I just want to inquire a little deeper about the emergency room initiative you guys took on, because I think that is very interesting, that supportive to hear for us to take back to our own states.
So I talked about a lot of that in depth at the podcast this morning because he was very interested in that as well. And to sort of just the Reader's Digest version of it is essentially that Maine has a law that says that you can be held in an emergency department for a period of, it's supposed to be 24 hours, and then you have to be sent to a psychiatric hospital for admission to determine whether you can be admitted on an emergency basis. And the key to that is that the hospital, if it determines you meet the statutory criteria and admits you, has to file with the court a request for a commitment hearing within, I think, 3 days, which then triggers your right to a hearing. You don't have that right in the ED. So as long as you stay in the ED,
Wow.
there is no hearing, okay? And the statute does not require any of the psychiatric hospitals to take anyone from the EDs. They have 100% discretion to not take people they don't want. So my client had spent 65 days in the ED because this 24-hour that then has two 48-hour extra things that goes to a judicial officer. There's no hearing. They just sign off if there's no place to send them. that no place that wants to accept them. And it was like 10 or 15 of these redos. And so we got involved probably on day, I don't know, 55 maybe. So we tried to get her out. And it was like, no, nothing we can do unless the her nurse is the one who called, referred the woman to us. And so we filed a writ of habeas corpus, and within 17 hours, she was moved upstairs to their psychiatric hospital. And then they wanted to not have the case heard because it was moot, quote unquote. We said, well, wait a minute, there's an exception to mootness. We need to have this thing heard before the judge. And the judge agreed. We had a big hearing, and I tell you, that nurse testified as to what the hell was going on. And the judge, basically said, I can't intervene in this systemically. The legislature needs to do something, or the executive needs to do something. But she did find that you have a right to a lawyer if you're there. The problem is this. The problem is that you're not going to be released if the people at the medical people feel you meet the criteria. You're not going to be released. It's going to keep on being redone and redone. So even if you get to a habeas hearing, the result isn't going to be a release. And because they can't order the psychiatric hospital to take you, you will essentially, and I believe the statute has severe constitutional problems, that the statute essentially allows for this sort of like indefinite detention. So I wrote a blog about it. I'll send it out with a decision. That the judge was very like, look, this is just awful. So there was a bill that was submitted to try and at least start the process, that because what the hospitals would say would be like, the person is too acute, or doesn't meet the milieu, okay? And they wouldn't give any reason. And so my client would be seeing people come and go while she just sat there, just like, and they'd be there for a day, they're gone. She's been there for 2 months, right? The hearing was pretty powerful. Her testimony at that hearing was just unbelievable about like because there were no windows in the ED. So she didn't see the sun. She lost a whole season when she finally went upstairs when there were windows, and she testified about that. So really, now that the bill didn't pass, didn't get out of committee, so I'm really looking at, we're looking at what other ways we can do it. There may be a challenge to the statute. I don't know. It's just allow it the way, because what happens is that, and the judge in her decision talked about how the state has a contract with these places to take the individuals, but in the contracts, it gives them the right not to take the individuals. So the court pointed out all of these problems. But so that is really, the emergency department, we're really looking at, because even if you get an attorney, because you don't get a hearing, and the judge talked about like, well, maybe couldn't you have a commitment hearing at the emergency department? And you can't, because the fact that the commitment hearing requires that you have to present a treatment plan. And there's no treatment done in the emergency department. The nurse testified that it's just security with no treatment, and it's worse than jail. I mean, she really testified. So like her testimony was, I was like, wow. It's one of these cases where I had to stop. I said, I'm not going to ask any more questions. She's just laying it out there. And the judge, it was a great decision, but she pointed out this needs a legislative or executive fix. And if there's none, then, we're going to be looking at, or I'm going to be looking at maybe another case or whatever. But so we took the case and so we're working on a brochure now that that is essentially how you go about getting a lawyer to file these habeases. But again, it's going to be a habeas to get you to the psych hospital. How that works when the statute doesn't require the hospitals to take the person, because without that, you don't get a hearing. The hearing doesn't trigger.
And Mark, let's be honest about why it's not going to pass through the committee.
Yeah, it's not going to pass because the state hospitals really object to it vehemently. And the private hospitals are a little more sympathetic to it because of the fact that part of the statute was that they would have to say why they couldn't take the person, and that you'd have to have data kept as to why the person couldn't be taken and what things you would need for them to take the person, so that you wouldn't just be able to say because milieu and acuity, they're conclusions, they're not reasons, right? And so that would help them probably advocate for more funding or whatever. But the state hospitals didn't want that, and you can, I mean, it's right on the website. You can read what it has on their testimony, that they thought it'd be too cumbersome. They have to hire another person for it, all these sorts of things, and it just didn't make it out of committee. So, but
the governor would likely veto it, right?
Yeah, the governor. That's what I heard because of that. But my point being is that I now have done everything. I've gone the legal route. There's been the legislative route. I mean the statute. I mean, if I have another client like that, I think my only course of action is going to be to challenge the statute as being unconstitutional, because you're literally under the statute, you could be held involuntarily detained. Now, how often that happens, you don't know, because they're not keeping any of this data. And that was the point of this particular piece of legislation. It was more of a data piece of legislation, where it'd be transparent data. How many people are meeting this criteria? How long have they been in there? Is this a real problem? Was my client just an outlier, right? But without that data, you don't know. So that was the it was very frustrating, but this case really highlighted. I mean, the case was something that really highlighted the problem, and the decision was really highlighted the problem. So that in and of itself really was, and you also have the right to an attorney, but again, it won't get you out if you still meet the criteria, because you can't force the hospitals to take the person. So I talk about it a lot on that podcast. I do go into it a bit more in detail.
Thank you so much, because that's really valuable work you're doing there. That is I wish every state could kind of glean from that. So I thank you so much. I don't know if there's any questions, or does anybody have any questions in the chat? I know that's where we got Myra's where Myra was coming from. And so any others, raise your hand or put them in the chat. But I just personally would like to extend my deep gratitude, because this was, I think, a really important conversation, really important presentation. And I would love if maybe explaining a little. I do have one question before we open it up, is so the legal right of way. What, because there was a question in the chat about extending it to nursing homes, right? Since there's a lot of locked units now on nursing homes. Where is that level of, is it only state facilities? Could we have some clarification just on the legal right of way? Is it apply across the board, or,
So it applies to facilities, and where individuals. So I mean, I don't want to get into the definitions. So it applies to facilities providing the care and treatment to individuals who are, and this is a PAIMI eligible, okay, for more of a reporting sort of description. And if they're PAIMI eligible individuals, and Maine has its own state P&A law as well. That's a little broader too. So if it's a facility that's providing care and treatment for an individual, and overnight, that has an individual who's mental illness, and you can see a lot of these cases, the access cases, will talk about there's no one who comes within that rubric, and no, they could, and so if they're there, we have access to those places. Interestingly enough, there was one issue that came up about clubhouses because they didn't provide the overnight care. And so so we worked with them. We didn't use our PAIMI authority. So I mean, it's always better to try and work with people than But it was an interesting question. I didn't even think about it. But yes, nursing homes. I can go to nursing homes. I can go anywhere I want. I mean, so. Oh no, homeless shelters, nursing homes. If there's a person who meets the criteria, including DD, I mean, it's not just PAMI. I mean, it's PAMI, DD. There's very few places as an individual with a disability is that a protection and advocacy organization cannot access. The number, and even then, I could probably shoehorn in half of the places to indicate that. I mean, I can't even think of one off the top of my head where I wouldn't have access to. When I say I mean like
That I did not know, actually. I really did not know that. I am dead serious. That is something I really did not know. I did believe it was only a state facility. So
No,
that's
goodness.
kind of what I've been told. So that's
Mhm.
incredible and awesome.
We have a guy,
And there
Kevin.
is,
We have a guy named Kevin. He's awesome. He goes mostly to the private facilities. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, so we have so that he and his specialty is the private facilities, and he does unbelievable work in these facilities. They know him there. So what'll happen is because we go over and the same thing with group homes, mental health group homes, we have individuals and we have a different contract because the money's so slight not slight, but it's a different chunk. We have other state contracts we use for different things, but the state can contract with us as the P&A. So we're not contracted as just some run-of-the-mill organization. We're contracted because we have this access authority. So when they contract us to go out to like group homes, we take with us our authority that we go in and can see, and also the state authority. So the group homes, the psychiatric hospitals, and what happens is we go back over and over again. So Kevin will go, over and over again, and he'll see people like, why are you still here, right? And the same thing with the group homes. Hey, with that thing that happened a couple months ago, what? Oh, that's fine. Okay, is this still a problem? So you have to go back over. If you just go once and check, oh, I've been, that doesn't do anybody any good. So we really have a system where we go over and over to make sure that we see the folks. And again, Kevin does a great job of being able to like fix things. He's in the moment because a lot of times you'll go in and there'll be like the issue of stupid. So someone says, hey, the shower's too hot. Well, no one listens to somebody when they say the shower's too hot. Kevin's there. Hey, the shower's too hot. Oh, let's go check. You know what it is? They turn it down. I mean, that's just like that happens. That kind of bullshit happens all the time where they don't listen to the person. Kevin happens to be there, talks to the person, goes to them, and says the exact same freaking thing that person said to the staff last week. Kevin says it, and then it gets fixed.
it gets
But-
heard. Yep.
And Mark, your advocates who are out there going to the clubhouses, the peer centers,
Homeless
they're
shelters.
hearing things, and that's why I remember a group home was short staffed, so they were locking out residents and leaving them in the winter sitting at a picnic table while they took another resident to the doctor's office, and that we found that out because the advocates were out there and talking to people, and I also want to lift up Kevin's work with the prison as well. That's why we were able to start training incarcerated folks in peer support was Kevin's work at Maine State Prison, and the advocate Jane was an advocate for that as well.
That's awesome. Quick
Mark?
question. So you said contract? Is it appointed or a contract? I understood the governor
it's a
appointed.
contract. So we were
Ah.
class counsel. We were class counsel for a consent decree that has been going on for 35 years. As part of the settlement agreement, consent decree, they had to contract with us to provide the independent advocates in like the state hospitals, in the community, in those sorts of things. And so as part of the settlement, and so the contracts, we have our authority wherever we go. We never get, in fact, the statute specifically prohibits us from doing anything that would take away from our access authority. Particularly, it prohibits us from entering into any agreement, anything that would diminish that authority. So when we do these things, it was under the consent decree that that was part of it. And so even though consent decree ended, we still have kept that role and because it hasn't changed, because it solves a lot of problems, because you'd rather solve problems than have us sue you every other year. And I think that's what happens when you have this sort of like ability to go out into the community and then have a relationship with the state to say, okay, we still have complaints against the state, don't get me wrong, but it's able, when you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody without having to have a lawyer, we're gonna call to my lawyer. It's like, okay, can we just get the water heat changed? I mean, that goes so far in terms of the resources that we don't have to use. Years ago, I've been here so long, I used to have to spend so many resources on just being able to talk to somebody. And then when I talked to them, the thing got fixed like that. But I spent hours going through and so it's a confluence of a lot of things. And that's why the PAC really helps, because we talk about these things. Like, is this, how about this area? How about this area? What are we doing with that? And because we really try and maximize all of the things that we can get to make sure that we have individuals that we're out in the community specifically, because you can't just sit and wait for the phone to ring. All these cases that you get, the big ones that I've got, or the one are because I can't tell you how many times that one of the advocates come back and say, hey, I found this person. I talked to the person, whoa, and that becomes a case. That person never would have called. In fact, that person had no ability to call. They might have been, because your ability to call is restricted from the worst things that are happening to you are places that restrict your ability to get a hold of me. And so unless someone goes out there to see we're there, I'm not going to hear about these things.
Mark and Elena, briefly, you were talking about other places where you've convened with folks. If either of you, again, this is my email, if either of you have any contacts in the Deep South, a comrade of mine is an unhoused psychiatric survivor organizer who's been trying to sound the alarm on model legislation that not only increases psychiatric incarceration, but tries to, in criminalizing homelessness, increase like the state's authority to send people off to do essentially, forced convict labor for such things as sleeping in public. Um, we're already working on this, but trying to network more with people. If either of you have any Southern contacts, this is what's happening in Louisiana. State Bill 196. I believe I can send you details
Yeah,
if you would.
I don't have many contacts outside, in terms of the
Right.
South. Most of it's New
So,
England.
so through peer support, okay, we have contacts all over the country, okay, and
Yep.
those are the people that kind of do this like underground work.
Yes.
Everybody
Yes.
knows, there's a lot of us that are out there that belong, and I work for the PNA, so some of the work I do is over there, a little bit outside the box. And I have other people that help me do that because there's some things I cannot get involved in. But yeah, if I have your information, I'll look into that because we have somebody that travels around quite a bit and might know a little bit more about that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll put my couple of addresses in the chat for you also. Okay. Okay.
Excellent. That's awesome. Connecting the dots. Myra, real quick, and I'm gonna hand over the host um to Susan in a moment, but I just wanna thank again you guys, and Elaine, really appreciate your input too, because you guys have expanded on stuff that we all need to talk about, and I think just cannot thank you enough. Really appreciate it. Myra, go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry. I feel like my train of thought got thrown off by the question about psychiatric advance directive. That's not what I was asking. Would like to hear from you, Mark. I feel like what you described, what you're running into with the private hospitals or any hospital, you get the runaround. That's exactly what's happening to me with PAMI. So my question is, how do I get through to PAMI without myself going on the PAIMI Advisory Council, because I don't have time.
So in in our organization, and like I said, we have a grievance process, right? That allows for at the very end a hearing, I believe, for our board of directors, if we don't take your case. So it goes through me, then it goes through Kim, and then I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% sure it goes to the board of directors. Not a hearing, but it goes. I mean, it doesn't. So I just it goes through those channels. So every and actually the PAC's supposed to know about this because you're supposed to give it to the PAC. Every P&A is has to have a grievance procedure, and so ours is like, if I don't take your case, when I say because people, so like if we have intake, and then intake will send a letter or whatever, and then the person oftentimes will then talk to me, and then I'll talk to the person, and then explain, why I did. And I tell you, sometimes I'll go, okay, yeah, I didn't get all the information. And then I'll say, okay, then I'll open your case. So I mean, but if it's like something where like, and we'll talk about it, and I say, but you have a right to appeal my thing to above me, to the executive director, and then you have a right to appeal above her. And so that's the process that we have, and every P&A is supposed to have that kind of process. I don't
So
know in terms of like,
who is above the executive director, please?
oh, so that for ours, and so for our P&A, we have this grievance. The grievance process doesn't the regulations don't have a specific grievance process you have. In Maine, we have this process. I don't know what the process is in other states, but they have to have a process. And in fact, the PAC report actually discusses what the grievance process is. And but you should be able to contact the P&A and say, what's your grievance? Give me a copy of your grievance process.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, is there any other questions? Any other feedback, dialogue, or any thoughts, any closing thoughts if there's no more questions? Wow.
I just want to thank
In terms
Mark.
of
This was-
which,
Thank
oh,
you,
go
Mark.
on.
I'm going to step out, but thank you all so much. But Mark, truly, thank you so much. But we have a legal director. We have the same process, but to have you here, where I think this was so necessary, because you have people
Yep.
coming together from other arenas,
Great.
and they need to hear this. So thank you so much for your
Oh,
time.
my
Great.
pleasure.
Thank you, KK.
And thank
Appreciate
you for
being
your
here. Thank
input
you.
too. That was awesome. Really
Thank you.
supported.
Thanks
Appreciate it.
so much.
Have a good one. Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I always think in terms of which which reforms are more critical to fight for versus like which is just like, okay, we solved that and now it just leads us to like loop around to the same thing down the line. I am very grateful for the model developed by the group Critical Resistance, in terms of reformist versus abolitionist steps in trying to counter and take away the power of these institutions to do carceral and ableist violence to us. I know this is a lot to read right now, but this is a brilliant model that they've developed that informs a lot of what I do. Last year I wrote and organized 3 of the shield alerts, human rights alerts that Mind Freedom put out for incarcerated people, psychiatrically incarcerated people, and like this is like always on my mind in terms of like this model of thinking like which steps get us like closer to this versus just into more complications.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. I hope everybody opens it up and takes a look at it. I am going to end the recording now, and I am going to officially hand it over to Susan Fitzmaurice from I Love You Lead On. I'm going to thank everybody. Mark, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was awesome. I think it was really important dialogue. I actually learned quite a few things. You really, this was awesome. Kelly, thank you for your input. Um, and I want to just share one more time that next month we're going to be sharing uh, ADA Watch, Jim Ward and Tom Olin, and I don't know if he's on any longer. David Oaks. I'm going to inquire of him because he was a part of the cross disability, real grassroots work in history. And so we're going to be having a cross disability dialogue, and PNA is part of it. Where, what does it look like the future? Rights are, not even, oh my gosh, the current state. So where do we go from here? So I
Rights are
appreciate
fictions.
it. I am
We get what
going
we're
to cut
organized to
the
take.
recording off and thank everybody. And if there's no other questions, everybody can log off or stay on for some dialogue. It's up to you guys, but I just want to officially thank you, cut the recording, and you guys are welcome back anytime. Come share anytime. It was awesome.
Thanks, KK. It was nice meeting everybody.